Wait, these cards are how old? Yes, it's true. At this point, the Radeon RX 480 and the GTX 1066 GB are approaching 2 years old. But again, like in the last video, if we're not looking at any graphics cards coming up on the scene, then these are fairly standard for what there's available. Okay, I know. So Radeon, yes, they've had a refresh on the 480 and it's now the 580 series. But what I want to look at here today is, well, is it better to be fine wine or game ready? It's really hard to say. These are the kind of things that you can't answer on launch day. So when these two cards, they came out fairly close together. So this one was the, well, technically this one was the 4 gig that I got for $199, but unlocked it to the 8 gig. Yeah, we did that. And this is the GTX 1060 Founders Edition. It retailed for $299. So this one was $299. You could get these cards for $250-ish. I know prices now wouldn't lead you to believe that, but the 8 gig was about $240. So they were fairly comparable in prices. 4 gig, much cheaper, much cheaper. It was the buy of the century, really. But the reality is we want to see how these things perform in today's games. Just like in the last go around, we mentioned how when the 1070 Ti came out, we got to see a lot of updated 1070 Vega 56, 64, and 1080 benchmarks along with those numbers to see where the 1070 Ti stood. But we really didn't see a refresh of the performance of the 480 and the 1060 or the 580. Mind you, the 580 is going to outperform this, so, I mean, take that for what you will. But we don't have a 580 because they're ridiculously expensive, and we want to see how the cards that the manufacturers, so NVIDIA and AMD, the cards they designed and they made, running the way they designed them to on their coolers. Very important to keep that in mind here, because this one is not going to stay at its stock frequencies. It's going to drop a bit. Fairly aggressive on the fan curve these days, so they did do a lot of work on that end. This one boosts fairly well, so take it for what it is. So we did run it on the test bench that we ran the last system on. So a 4 gigahertz Ryzen 7 1700 system with a set of 16 gigabytes DDR4 3200 memory on the X370X Power Gaming Titanium from MSI. Let's take a quick look at the specifications of each card. The GTX 1060 features 1280 CUDA cores with a 1708 megahertz boost clock with 6 gigabytes running of GDDR5 running at 8 gigabits per second. And conversely, the Radeon RX 480 has 2,304 stream processors with a 1266 megahertz boost and a 8 gigabyte frame buffer running at 8 gigabits per second as well. One's on a 256-bit bus, that's the Radeon card, and one's on a 192-bit bus, that's the GeForce card. So what we want to do is see how these cards perform over a variety of more modern titles. Now it's important to note as we get into these benchmarks, they are all run at 1080p, and the respective settings will be displayed at the top of the screen. All right, let's jump into that. So starting things off, we're going to take a look at 3D Mark Time Spy, and we see here the GTX 1060 having a handy lead here with 200-point advantage. So I want to see, does that hold true throughout the game titles? So the first game up is Far Cry 5, and we see the GTX 1060 holding a slightly stronger average FPS, but a weaker 1% and 0.1% low values. So that tighter spread results in smoother gameplay. So moving on to Wolfenstein 2, we see that again, just like with the 570 and 1063 gig, NVIDIA has done quite a bit of work on their drivers for Vulkan, and we see a rather impressive showing from Wolfenstein 2. Radeon fans will be quick to point out that probably what was going on here was throttling from the reference cooler. Moving into Assassin's Creed Origins, we see once again that this game heavily favors the green team, showing quite the considerable lead over on the GTX 1066 gigabyte. So Middle-earth: Shadow of War is the next title, showing a favorable comparison for the GTX 1060, once again leading by just a few frames on all fronts. Now, looking at the last title, Final Fantasy 15, oddly enough, this game exhibited some really crazy behavior between both graphics cards And, well, I even moved it over to an SSD, and we still got the same behavior. So take these results for what you will on Final Fantasy 15. I'm not going to put those down as gospel, but I did take the documentation and wanted to share those results with you guys. So, in 2018, were you better off with your fine wine, or were you better off game ready? Well, it's really a mixed bag. It's hard to say. To be quite honest, it depends on what game you play and whether or not you have a FreeSync, G-Sync, or no sync display. And honestly, I don't think you could have went wrong either way. You're going to get a little hotter, you're going to use a little bit more power. Well, really not a whole lot of downside to the GTX 1060 other than the price. Well, guys, that's it. And this has been Keith with WCCF Tech TV, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will catch you in the next one.